Today is Tuesday, August 18th, 2026, and today is National Bad Poetry Day. So I wrote something for the occasion. Roses are red. Violets are plants. I tried to write poetry, but forgot how it works. I believe I understood the assignment. And August 18th gives us an element discovered on the sun before anyone found it on Earth. An entire colony that disappeared after leaving behind one carved word, and a tree trimming job that required hundreds of soldiers, helicopters, bombers, and one very determined chainsaw. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who apparently spends an unhealthy amount of time wandering through historical rabbit holes so you don't have to. Helium feels like an element we discovered at a birthday party. You fill a balloon, breathe some in, say something in a ridiculous voice, and briefly become the funniest person in the room, or at least the highest pitched. But helium wasn't discovered by someone investigating balloons. It was discovered by looking at the sun. In the 19th century, scientists had learned how to use a spectroscope to separate light into different wavelengths. When they aimed one at a hot substance, they saw a pattern of bright lines. Each element produced its own pattern. It was basically a chemical fingerprint made from light. That meant scientists could identify substances without holding them, touching them, or even being anywhere near them. On August 18, 1868, French astronomer Pierre Janssen was in India observing a total solar eclipse. The moon blocked the brightest part of the sun, giving Janssen a chance to study the glowing gases around its edge. He saw the familiar lines produced by hydrogen. Then he noticed a bright yellow line that didn't belong there. It was close to the pattern produced by sodium, but not close enough. Something in the sun was creating a line that did not match any element known on Earth. British astronomer Norman Lockyer independently studied the same mysterious line and concluded that it came from a new element. It was named helium, after Helios, the Greek personification of the sun. What caught me off guard is that some scientists believe helium might exist only on the sun. And honestly, that seems reasonable. If the only place you've ever seen something is 93 million miles away, perhaps we don't have that here, is a fair conclusion. For more than 25 years, helium remained an element that humanity could see but could not find. Then, in 1895, chemist William Ramsay released a gas from a uranium-bearing mineral and examined its spectrum. There was the same yellow line. Helium had been on Earth the entire time. We found it in sunlight before we found it under our own feet. And one strange line seen from a distance leads naturally to one strange word found much closer to home. John White had been waiting nearly 3 years to return to Roanoke Island. He was the governor of an English colony established there in 1587. Among its 117 settlers were his daughter Eleanor, his son-in-law Ananias Dyer, and his newborn granddaughter Virginia. The colony was already in trouble. Food and supplies were limited, and relations with nearby native communities have been damaged by earlier English violence. The settlers convinced White to return to England for help. He expected to come back within months. Then England's war with Spain got in the way. With the Spanish Armada threatening the country, English ships were pulled into military service. White could not secure another voyage to Roanoke until 1590. By the time he reached the island, he had no idea what he would find. On August 18th, Virginia Dare's third birthday, White went ashore. The colony was empty. There were no bodies and no signs that the settlement had been attacked. The houses hadn't been burned or smashed. They appeared to have been carefully taken apart. White had arranged a system before leaving. If the settlers moved, they were supposed to carve the name of their destination somewhere visible. If they had been forced to leave under threat, they were supposed to add a cross. White found the letters C-R-O carved into a tree. Then he found the full word on a wooden post, Croatoan. There was no cross. Croatoan was not a meaningless message. It was the name of both a nearby island, now Hatteras Island, and the indigenous community living there. Manteo, a Croatoan man who had worked closely with the English, had been part of the colony. White believed his family and the other settlers had moved there. The mystery might have ended almost immediately if he had been able to check. He asked the crew to sail to Croatoan, but a storm drove the ships away from the coast. The vessel carrying White was pushed out into the Atlantic and eventually returned to England. He never reached Croatoan, and he never saw his family again. For centuries, the colony's disappearance had inspired theories involving attacks, starvation, disease, Spanish soldiers, hurricanes, and increasingly elaborate supernatural explanations. But the simplest possibility has always been carved into that post. At least some of the settlers may have gone to live with the Croatoan people. Recently, archaeological work has made that possibility more interesting. Researchers on Hatteras Island have found European objects dating to the Roanoke period. More recently, they have uncovered large amounts of hammer scale, tiny flakes of iron produced when a blacksmith works hot metal. That suggests European-style ironworking may have been taking place within the Croatoan community. Other period artifacts have been found at inland locations, supporting another possibility. The colonists may have separated into smaller groups rather than all traveling to the same place. None of that closes the case. No graves, human remains, settlement buildings, or village sites have been definitively connected to the missing colonists. But it does make the word lost feel slightly misleading. They left a destination. John White understood it. He simply never got the chance to follow it. That word was carved into wood. Nearly 4 centuries later, another piece of wood at the center of an international dispute would be handled with considerably less subtlety. Inside the Korean demilitarized zone is the Joint Security Area at Panmunjom. It's one of the few places where North Korean and United Nations command personnel operate face-to-face. Near the bridge of no return stood a large poplar tree. Its branches were blocking the view between 2 United Nations command guard posts, so a crew was sent to trim it. This should have been routine landscaping. On August 18, 1976, Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett accompanied the work crew to the Joint Security Area. North Korean soldiers approached and demanded that the trimming stop. When the crew continued, the confrontation suddenly turned violent. The North Korean soldiers attacked with clubs and axes taken from the work party. Boniface and Barrett were killed, and several other members of the group were injured. The incident created an immediate crisis. The Korean War had ended with an armistice, not a peace treaty, and both sides remained heavily armed along the border. The United States and South Korea had to respond without turning the confrontation into another war. Their answer was Operation Paul Bunyan. 3 days after the attack, the United Nations Command returned to the Joint Security Area. This time, they weren't trimming the tree. They were taking the entire thing down. Engineers arrived with chainsaws while American and South Korean troops surrounded them. Attack helicopters hovered nearby. Artillery was ready. B-52 bombers flew overhead with fighter escorts. F-111s were armed and waiting, and the aircraft carrier Midway had been moved into position offshore. All of this was there to support men with chainsaws. North Korean troops watched, but they did not interfere. The tree came down in 42 minutes. I don't know whether anyone actually said timber, but with that much military support, it probably would have sounded like an official statement. The operation sent a clear message without firing a shot. The stump was deliberately left standing as a reminder of Captain Boniface and Lieutenant Barrett. There's something almost cinematic about that scene. Helicopters in the air, bombers overhead, soldiers surrounding a tree, and a chainsaw doing the actual work. And that combination of action movie toughness and very precise movement makes me think of someone who spent much of his life refusing to choose between the two. He grew up in Houston with a choreographer for a mother. Her dance studio became one of the central places in his childhood, but dancing was only part of what he did. He played football, practiced gymnastics, studied martial arts, swam and ice skated. A serious knee injury ended his hopes for a football career and continued causing problems throughout his life. But he kept dancing, eventually moving to New York to train at the Harkness and Joffrey ballet schools. That background gave him an unusual presence. He could move like a professional dancer and still look completely believable in a bar fight. Before long, he was shifting between roles that normally wouldn't belong to the same actor. He could play a teenage gang member, a Soviet fighting resistance leader, a romantic dance instructor, a philosophical bouncer, a bank-robbing surfer, and a ghost trying to communicate through Whoopi Goldberg. And somehow, none of those felt like the strange choice. His real breakthrough let him draw on his real dance training. The movie was expected to be a modest release, but Dirty Dancing became a phenomenon. He didn't just perform it. He also co-wrote and sang She's Like the Wind, which reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. The man who gave us Johnny Castle, Dalton, Bodie, and Sam Wheat was Patrick Swayze, born on August 18, 1952. What made Swayze unusual wasn't simply that he could dance and fight. It was that he never seemed embarrassed by either side of himself. He brought ballet training into action films and physical strength into romantic roles. He could deliver a roundhouse kick in one movie and make pottery emotionally complicated in another. He spent 34 years married to Lisa Namey, whom he had met when they were both young dancers at his mother's studio. Even after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he continued working until shortly before his death in 2009. Patrick Swayze became a movie star because he could play the tough guy. He became memorable because he never treated toughness as the only interesting thing about a man. What stays with me is how quickly we decide what something means from the first version we see. The fuller picture usually takes longer, and it rarely arrives as neatly as we would like. I don't think uncertainty makes the search less worthwhile. It may be the reason to keep looking. Anyway, a word in a tree, a chainsaw nearby, helium floats, and so does this rhyme. I miss the rhyme and possibly the deadline, which reminds me of something Douglas Adams once said. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by. If you'd like to hear more of my work or see other corners of the internet I've been quietly building things in, you can head over to waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns. Thanks for hanging out with me for a few minutes. I'll see you tomorrow.